In 1971, President Nixon did something no American leader had ever done. He severed the dollar's connection to gold. Within 9 years, inflation hit 13.5%, and anyone holding cash lost half their wealth. That wasn't a crisis. That was the preview. Because what happened after Nixon closed the gold window follows the exact same four-stage pattern that destroyed the Roman denarius, obliterated Germany's middle class in 1923, and is now accelerating in America with $36 trillion in unpayable debt. Right now, the M2 money supply stands at $21.2 trillion. 5 years ago, it was $15.4 trillion. That's $5.8 trillion created in under 5 years, a 38% expansion. To put that in perspective, the entire U.S. money supply in 1980 was $1.6 trillion. We printed more than 3 times the entire 1980 economy in just 5 years. But here's what matters. The inflation hasn't fully hit yet. What we experienced in 2021 through 2023, the 9% official inflation, the 20% real increase in groceries and rent, that was the first wave. The second wave is building now, and it follows a pattern that has repeated for 2,000 years without exception. The U.S. national debt is now $36.2 trillion. Interest payments alone hit $1.13 trillion in 2024, more than the entire defense budget. There is no path to paying this debt. The only way out is inflation, sustained, middle-class destroying inflation that will transfer tens of trillions in wealth over the next decade. This is Economic Pattern Vault, where we break down financial history to understand how markets actually work by studying how they fail. Each video uncovers the repeating patterns behind economic booms, debt cycles, and power shifts, so you can see what's happening beneath the headlines. If you find this breakdown useful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every currency collapse in history follows 4 identical stages. Stage 1, the foundation. A nation establishes a trusted currency backed by something real, gold, silver, commodities. People save in the currency because it holds value. Stage 2, debasement begins. The government faces mounting costs, wars, welfare programs, imperial overreach. Tax revenue isn't enough, so they debase the currency. They reduce the precious metal content. They print more paper. They promise it's temporary. Stage 3, loss of control. The debasement accelerates. Inflation rises. The middle class holding wealth in the currency gets obliterated. Meanwhile, those closest to money creation, the elites, the landowners, they survive. They consolidate. They buy assets from desperate sellers at fire sale prices. Stage 4, the reset. A new currency is introduced. Wealth has transferred from millions to thousands. And the people who lost everything never saw it coming. Let me prove this pattern with 3 examples. In 64 AD, Emperor Nero needed money desperately. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, had contained 95% pure silver under Augustus. Nero reduced it to 80% purity. Most Romans didn't notice. The coin looked the same, but contained 15% less silver. 130 years later, that same denarius contained just 46% silver. By 253 AD, it contained 20% silver. A decade later, 2%. That's 2% silver in what was once the most trusted currency on Earth. What happened to prices? They exploded 1,000% over 100 years. A measure of wheat that cost 100 denarii in 150 AD cost 100,000 denarii by 250 AD. Who lost? The Roman middle class. Merchants, soldiers on fixed salaries. A merchant who saved 100,000 denarii over his lifetime, enough to buy a farm, watched it become enough to buy a loaf of bread. Who won? Large landowners, senators with estates, anyone holding physical assets. A farm worth 100,000 denarii in 150 AD was worth 100 million denarii in 250 AD. The land didn't change. The currency did. By 300 AD, Rome had transitioned from a republic with a broad middle class to an oligarchy where a few hundred families owned most of the empire's wealth. Within 200 years, the Western Roman Empire collapsed. After World War I, Germany owed 132 billion gold marks in reparations. Germany had abandoned the gold standard during the war. The Weimar government made a choice. Instead of raising taxes or cutting spending, they printed money. Watch how fast this accelerates. January 1919, 8.9 marks per US dollar. July 1922, 493 marks per dollar. January 1923, 17,972 marks per dollar. November 1923, 2 trillion marks per dollar. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks at the end of 1922 cost 200 billion marks in November 1923. A middle-class family with 100,000 marks in savings, enough for 5 years of comfortable living, couldn't buy a postage stamp by December 1923. But anyone holding real assets survived. Anyone who had borrowed money in marks saw their debt inflated away. You borrowed 100,000 marks in 1921 to buy a house. By 1923, your debt was essentially gone. Your house was yours, free and clear. Who lost? Teachers, civil servants, pensioners, anyone on fixed income or holding cash savings. Who won? Industrialists like Hugo Stinnes, who borrowed heavily to buy assets during the inflation, then repaid the loans with worthless marks. The middle class felt betrayed. They had saved, followed the rules, trusted the government. They were destroyed, and a failed artist named Adolf Hitler built a political movement on their rage. August 15, 1971, President Nixon suspended dollar convertibility into gold. For 27 years, since Bretton Woods in 1944, the dollar had been pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. By 1971, America was hemorrhaging gold. On August 11th, Britain requested $3 billion in gold moved from Fort Knox. Nixon couldn't comply without exposing that the U.S. didn't have enough gold. On August 15th, he closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat currency overnight. What happened next? The 1970s delivered stagflation. Inflation soared to 13.5% by 1980. Those holding dollars watched purchasing power evaporate. But those holding assets flourished. Gold went from $35 per ounce in 1971 to $850 per ounce in 1980, a 24x increase in 9 years. The wealth gap began widening systematically. In 1971, the top 1% held 23% of wealth. By 2024, 32%. The shift from gold-backed money to pure fiat enabled unlimited money printing, which disproportionately benefits asset holders. Here's the pattern insiders recognized in all three cases. Inflation doesn't destroy wealth, it transfers it. When currency is debased, those holding the currency lose purchasing power. But those holding real assets, land, buildings, businesses, see those assets appreciate in nominal terms. The asset doesn't change. The measuring stick does. In Rome, senators bought farms from ruined merchants for fractions of their real value. In Weimar Germany, industrialists borrowed heavily, bought factories, and repaid loans with worthless marks. After Nixon closed the gold window, anyone who understood the shift moved wealth into real estate and gold before prices adjusted. Governments facing unpayable debts always choose inflation over default because inflation is politically survivable. Voters don't understand it. Default is immediate crisis. Inflation is slow-motion crisis that can be blamed on other factors. Stage 1, complete. America established the gold-backed dollar as world reserve currency in 1944. Stage 2, complete. Gold window closed 1971. National debt grew from $398 billion in 1971 to $36.2 trillion in 2024, a 91x increase in 53 years. Stage 3, in progress. Annual deficit in 2024, $1.9 trillion. Interest payments, $1.13 trillion, more than the entire defense budget. Here's where the death spiral begins. As debt grows, interest payments grow. Interest payments add to the deficit, which adds to the debt, which increases interest payments. By 2034, interest payments will hit $1.7 trillion annually. Total federal revenue in 2024 was $4.9 trillion. Total federal spending was $6.8 trillion. By 2034, mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest will exceed total revenue today. There will be nothing left for defense, education, infrastructure. The government has three options. Option 1, cut spending. Politically impossible. You'd have to cut Social Security and Medicare, which are untouchable. Option 2, raise taxes. You need to raise taxes by 40% across the board. Political suicide. Option 3, print money. This is the only option. The Federal Reserve will buy Treasury bonds by creating new money. This is how you get inflation. And we're already doing it. The median American household has $200,000 in net worth. When real inflation runs 10% annually for 10 years, here's what happens. Your house appreciates nominally from $400,000 to $700,000. But in real purchasing power, it's only worth $270,000 in today's dollars. You've lost 33% in real terms. Your retirement account nominally grows from $200,000 to $350,000. But real purchasing power is $135,000. You've lost 33% in real terms. Your wages grow from $75,000 to $110,000. But real purchasing power is $42,000. You've lost 44% in real income. This is the inflation trap. Nominal numbers rise. Real purchasing power falls. And most people don't understand the difference. Meanwhile, the top 1% with $11.6 million median net worth, 80% in stocks and real estate, see their assets appreciate with inflation. $5 million in stocks becomes $15.5 million nominally, with real purchasing power of $6 million. They gained wealth. If they hold debt, inflation destroys it. A $2 million mortgage in 2024 still requires a $2 million payoff in 2034, but the real burden is only $770,000 in today's dollars. This is the transfer mechanism. Inflation transfers wealth from those holding cash and wages to those holding stocks, real estate, and debt. Total U.S. debt, government plus household plus corporate, stands at $90 trillion. Annual GDP, $28 trillion. Debt to GDP ratio, 321%. Historical pattern. When debt to GDP exceeds 250%, countries either default or inflate. The U.S. won't default, so will inflate. If you run 10% inflation for 10 years while holding real GDP at 2% growth, nominal GDP grows from $28 trillion to $73 trillion. Debt grows from $90 trillion to $130 trillion. Debt to GDP falls from 321% to 178%. You've solved the debt crisis through inflation, but you've destroyed the middle class in the process. The pattern that destroyed Rome, obliterated Weimar Germany's middle class, and began in America in 1971 has one consistent outcome. Inflation transfers wealth from those holding currency to those holding assets. Governments facing unpayable debts always choose inflation over default. Understanding this pattern doesn't require panic. It requires recognizing that nominal numbers rising doesn't mean you're getting richer if your purchasing power is falling. The middle class in Rome, in Weimar Germany, and after Nixon's gold window closure didn't see it coming because each stage blended into the next. The difference today is that we have 2,000 years of historical data showing exactly how this pattern unfolds. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but financial behavior does. If this breakdown helped you see the pattern more clearly, like the video, subscribe to Economic Pattern Vault, and share your perspective in the comments. Understanding the cycle is how you stay ahead of it.